Articles of impeachment are flying fast and furious in the House this week. And today, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene announced that a certain president of the United States is on the hit list. But what do voters think about impeachment? We'll get into that, but first here's a recap of some of our recent polling. 63% of U.S. likely voters say that it's at least somewhat likely that Joe Biden personally profited from a deal to receive funds in exchange for foreign policy decisions while he was the vice president, including 44% who think it's very likely. 85% of Republicans, 65% of independents, and even 42% of Democrats think it's likely. Also, 66% of voters, an astounding majority, agree that the Hunter Biden scandal is actually about the whole Biden family, including the President of the United States. 80% of Republicans, a whopping 72% of independents, and 42% of Democrats agree. But here's another question that we haven't asked since November. How likely is it that since becoming president, Joe Biden has committed high crimes and misdemeanors that would justify Congress impeaching him? A new record, 53%, a strong majority of U.S. likely voters, and 2 points higher than the highest Trump ever got in a Biden rematch, say it's at least somewhat likely that President Joe Biden has committed crimes. That's up 4 points since November. 38% say very likely, up 7 points, and only 28% say not at all likely. Here are the party numbers, and 75% of Republicans think it's likely, but also a plurality of independents. 49% of them say likely, and only 36% say not likely. A quick note, that 13-point spread among independents is pretty similar to the lead that Trump has over Biden in 2024 rematches. So it's at least somewhat reasonable to say that independents are voting Trump because they think Biden's a criminal. But look at Democrats. 35%, more than a third, think it's likely that Biden committed crimes in office that would justify impeaching him, including 21% who say very likely. But most importantly, that increase is driven almost entirely by Democrats. Back in November, 27%, 8 points fewer than today, thought that Biden was a criminal. A 16-point overall shift. But should Biden be impeached? Here are the results from a question we asked last summer. 52% of voters at least somewhat supported impeaching Biden at the time, but only 38% strongly. Now here are the results from today. A slightly differently worded question, but the signal is clear. 42% of voters want an impeachment to happen, but a plurality, 45%, say no. Is that a shift in opinion? Well, of course, somewhat, but it has to be said that the bar for a yes-no question is higher than for a question that allows respondents to pick somewhat support. The 42% who say yes is higher than the 38% who strongly supported impeachment in September, but lower than the combined 52% who at least somewhat supported. But there are obviously other factors at play. Negative opinions about Biden's scandals have definitely been gathering steam, though a majority of voters also now, for the first time, say Joe Biden is essentially just a puppet. And there's also probably an aspect of Republicans holding themselves to a higher moral authority or something like that. And for those of you wondering, we never really asked a question exactly like this during Trump's term. Democrats pounced on impeachment so fast that we had to ask questions like this to play catch up. But here are the party numbers for today's question, and 70% of Republicans support impeachment, as do 19% of Democrats. But independents are split, 39 to 40%. That 39% is, again, higher than the 32% of independents who strongly supported impeachment in August. But here's the final question in the set. Regardless of whether people want impeachment or not, very few voters think it's going to happen. Only 28%, in fact, and only 11% say it's very likely. Again, here are the party numbers, and basically nobody thinks that the 118th Republican Congress is going to pursue impeachment. Republicans are most optimistic at 39%, but only 14% say it's very likely. And that's pretty uninspiring, considering 70% of Republicans want Biden impeached. Those numbers have absolutely collapsed since November. Back then, 54%, a strong majority of all likely voters, thought that Republicans would begin impeachment proceedings against Biden if Republicans took control of Congress. Now, obviously, not winning both houses took a little wind out of the Republican sails. But also recall that back in November, Republicans told us that they wanted new leaders in D.C., and they didn't get them. So what happens next? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comments. I have to think that any show of leadership would be well received by Republican voters. Republicans, far more than Democrats, don't perceive their leaders to be winners. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe on YouTube or Rumble, and thanks for watching.